So, good afternoon everyone. My name is Meraldan M. Colanag and I am one of the reporters of safety issues of ICT and uses of ICT policies in the teaching and learning environment. So, the objectives for this discussion is that the students are expected to know the importance of ICT implementation, to learn the safety issues of ICT, to understand the effect of cyberbullying to ICT, and to be aware of ICT policies in the teaching and learning environment. So before we go to the proper discussion, we prepared a pre-test for you to answer. You can send your answer in our chat box. This is a 5-item test. Just 2 minutes of your time will be taken. So the questions are, is an extension term for information technology which refer to all communication technologies. 2. A principle of action adopted by government or individual. 3. Sending, posting, or sharing negative, harmful, false, or mean content about someone else. 4. The condition of being protected from danger, risk, or injury. 5. The surroundings or condition in which a person, animal, or plant lives or operates. So if you are finished, the answers are ICT, policies, cyberbullying, safety, and environment. So I will discussing to you about the importance of ICT implementation. So why is ICT implemented? So, originally, ICT is implemented to change the teaching and the learning process from the traditional instructional teacher-centered endeavor to a learner-centered approach with the active participation of the learner coach. So, when we say teacher-centered, that means is na ang teacher ang mas more nag-dominate sa classroom. So, for an example, if a student is like a can, empty can, so the teachers will fill the student with knowledge that he or she needed. Then, after that, the teacher will assess the student. So, ganun ang teacher-centered. So, individually ang pag-assess sa students. While the learner-centered, there is an interaction between the teacher and the students, and also the assessment could be by group, by pair, or individually, but on a creative way. So action taken to make ICT possible. To improve the quality education, the policymakers and implementation manager must have a clear vision in investments of ICTs that requires a vast amount of money. Also requires not only careful planning for skill enhancement of both teachers and learners, but also thoughtful implementation. Plan for the introduction of high technology and understand the contextual complexities of the educational ecosystem of the communities. So we all know so that for the ICT to be more effective, to become one of the educational system, may nakalaan na kapital para sa ICT so that mas mabilis ang implementation niya. Pero as we know, the process of integrating of it is too complex daw. So there will be changes in the educational system. The curriculum, the teaching style, the teacher's competencies, the institutional readiness, and long-term financing is needed. So, ang ICT is a continuous process siya na hindi na, kunwari, ngayon naglaan ng money for that. Hindi ibig sabihin na tapos na. So, it said that continuous siya, so long-term. So, ganun ang ICT. So, there should be a vast amount of money na needed sa ICT because we are talking about technology. When we talk about technology, maraming mga gadgets ang kailangan dyan so that it will be more effective. And also, we should plan in a thoughtful way kung paano ma-enhance ang skills ng teachers and learners. For example, now the DepEd is having their seminars for their teachers to be more knowledgeable about the ICT, so that the teachers will not be would not have any difficulty in teaching it to the learners. So who can benefit? So the one who will benefit from this implementation are the youth or students. So the students are more faster to acquire ICT skills than adults, and also more likely to share the skills with the peers, either intentionally or through interaction. So diba, ang mga millennials karon is mas dali sila makatuon og mga new knowledge, mga gadget or whatever. Diba, mas dali sila makatuon kaysa sa mga nana sa mga middle or late adulthood. So mas ginapaspasan sa ato ang government na, or let me say sa DepEd na ang mga teacher pod makasabay sa mga millennials karon. So also teachers will benefit from this in positive way and in negative way. So majority of the teachers have positive attitude towards ICT and happy with the current ICT use in English. So daghan og ganahan sa paggamit og ICT, pero dili sila tanan, because ang mga karaan ng mga teacher mas prefer nila itong mga traditional way na more on Manila papers, cartulinas, ganun, because it is more kanang mas comfortable sila gamiton ang mga ingato. Pati sa pag-lesson plan, mas dali para sa ilaha ang pag-writing, pag-sulat na lang kesa sa mag-download back, kaya malibog daw sila. And results showed that some teachers find difficulties in changing from the traditional pedagogical method of teaching to a technological-based pedagogy. So na-explain na nako siya na mas gusto jud sa uban ang traditional kesa sa technological. So katong mga bagong graduate or para sa to, mas prefer jud na to ang naka-PowerPoint na or mga other applications, kay mas more creative siya tan-awon ug mas dali ka pud siya himuon. Also suggested that continuous professional development programs that can motivate the attitudes of the teachers, possibly to equip them with new ICT skills. So diba, ako na naingon kaganiha, DepEd is making seminars para sa mga teachers to develop their ICT skills para dili sila maglisod pag fully implemented man siya karon, pero kailangan gihapon i-seminar ang mga teacher, because ang uban naagihapon sila difficulty about that. Also, result of ICT. So there are positive and negative result of ICT. So dili lang ang Pilipinas ang nag-implement ani, so ang tibuok kalibutan nag-implement ani. So those teachers who are more proficient in using ICT focus on the internet search and word processing instead of project-based teaching. So diba, mas more daghan mga teachers karon na okay, research this, research that. So mas dali ka sa ilaha, mas okay ka sa ilaha ing ani kay send na lang sa email or print this, ganyan. Pero diba, usahay kay mas na ay mga uban students mas preferred nila na kung mag-research man naka-written or sa book magkuha, kay all we know na ang sa internet dili man tanan estudyante, pero daghang estudyante pod na copy paste na lang, wala na basa-basa. So for my own opinion, mas okay kung ang student is more on kung mag-research man basa-basa pod, ganon. Then, school management had not fully implemented the policies developed by the Ministry of Education in Kenya. They assert that some schools had developed guidelines on how to implement ICT, but no attempt was made to achieve them. Hindered the efficient implementation of ICT in public secondary schools in Meru County. So, dili lang kita ang nagka-problema sa pag-implement sa ICT, no? Kay napoy laing countries na naglisod sila sa pag-implement because of shortage of let's say na technology or sometimes sa mga teachers. Also kailangan jud siya og kanang more monitor and we should be more thoughtful na dili tanan mga intelligent. So tanan kailangan tudluan. So dili jud na to maingon na karon na seminar how na mo ana. So dili siya. So kailangan na mabusising pag-implement sa ICT so that the teachers and learners ay magkasabay sa isa't isa. So there would be interaction between them.
So I will briefly be explaining about the 5 successive phases of ICT implementation, representing different levels of ICT transformation of the educational and learning processes. This was suggested by Muij and Smith 2001. The first phase is the incidental and isolated use of ICT by one or more teachers. When teachers are digitally literate or trained or knowledgeable about ICT, this could lead to higher order thinking skills, provide creative and individualized options for students to express their understanding, and also leave students better prepared to deal with ongoing technological change in a society as well as in the workplace. The second one is increasing awareness of ICT relevance at all levels. Half of the effort, as we all know, half of our efforts that we do in our daily lives in order to survive are completely done by technological devices. What are the technological devices? Cell phones, laptops, computers, and machines. Information technology is tightly linked in our daily lives. Teachers perceive that ICT allows students with special needs or difficulties to perform their tasks, and many students regard ICT tools to be extremely beneficial in that they can assist them finish their assignments, not only for students but also for teachers. The third phase, emphasis on ICT coordination and the hardware. Understanding the importance of ICT coordination in management of information and communication technology or ICT issues such as facilities, hardware, and software, monitoring ICT activities, and preparing, planning, and performing trainings for both teachers and students. Fourth phase is the focus of didactic and innovation and ICT support. So ICT to support learning process in more flexible and optimizing way. By the way, what do you mean by didactic? Didactic means a focus on teaching knowledge to other people. So innovation is being creative. So ICT to support learning processes in more flexible and optimizing way. For example, taking into consideration the basic characteristic of students, we could use the ICT or the information about the information of the students about their learning progress to differentiate learning process, learning becoming more time and location agnostic. The last phase, the fifth phase, is the use of ICT integrated teaching and learning that is independent of time and place. Teaching or teachers' capacity to arrange learning in innovative ways, integrate technology with teaching methods, create socially engaged classroom, and encourage cooperative communication, collaborative learning, and group work will all play a role in effective integration of ICT into learning environment. Teachers can use technologies to arrange learning in innovative ways to create a place where students can learn efficiently. So that's the last phase. According to the study of Tondur et al. 2008 entitled ICT Integration in the Classroom, Challenging the Potential of the School Policy, showed that there is potential impact and policy-related factors on the actual integration in teaching, learning, in daily classroom instructions. The results also suggest that principals have a big role in facilitating the policies but in place when defining this policy. So these policies could have a potential impact in teaching and learning. That's all.
Hi, good day. My name is Rachel May Itaoy, your fifth presenter in Group 2, and I'll be the one discussing the uses of ICT policies in the teaching and learning environment. What is ICT policy? ICT policy is a set of predefined actions aimed to encouraging the use of ICT in all socio-economic endeavors. A policy is typically defined as a deliberate plan of action to guide decision and achieve rational outcomes. Usually, people do what they want to do without any further limits. That's why a policy or a rules has been made, so that they would be guided for a good outcome. ICT policy for education. ICT integration in education is a complex process, and all education stakeholders require clear guidance as to what is expected of them throughout this process. Poor planning defeats the potential of ICTs before they are even applied in real-life situations. ICT has the most potential to illuminate learning, empower communities, and unlock social development. It has the ability to reach the most remote areas, the most challenged education system, and make transformative national advances. However, it can only perform such miracles if it is based on end-to-end policy. Otherwise, it is a fragmented and deficient, with expensive equipment but no technical support, or content but no connectivity, trained teachers but no infrastructures, or it is unequal and limited coverage in some areas, leaving others out. Literature shows that if ICT is well utilized in learner-centered schools, it has the potential to enhance the teaching and learning process in many ways. It shows that learning activities that are challenging, authentic, multisensorial, and multidisciplinary, students are motivated with higher attendance report, motivation, and academic accomplishment as a result of ICT programs. Policies that have been made in the teaching and learning environment is important because technology do not guarantee effective learning, and everyone knows how much time students can waste surfing the internet. Yet many aspects of technology make it easier to create environment that fit the principles of learning.
Hello everyone, I am Jella Daguhoy, and for today I will be continuing the discussion about the uses of ICT policies in the teaching and learning environment. So, in developing countries such as the Philippines, education takes place under the situation that are substantially different from those in already developed countries. Most developed countries were likely more advanced when it comes to technology than those developing countries. The poorest countries spend the least proportionately on non-salary related educational expenditures because of their status as lack for funds. They likely focused on investing and spending more money on salary related expenditures. They focused on what's more important, and that's the teaching personnel. They hire teachers and even non-teaching personnel such as office clerk and other services that needs to be paid. The Philippines is one of the one of many developing nations that have turned to information and communication technology, or ICT, as a tool to improve the teaching and learning. But the educational system reveals, but our educational system reveals many of the same problems and limitation of its fellow developing nations upon implementing the ICT, and that issue is uh, lack of funds or lack of budget for the project. Upon the implementation, it endures from several weaknesses. So in the slide, there are I enlist three weaknesses upon the implementation of the ICT in the country. First one is the absence of documentation and information on how ICT is used. The second one is there is a lack of coordination between the public and private sector efforts. And lastly, not sufficient teacher preparation. These issues upon implementing the ICT in the country needs to be fixed as soon as possible in order for the implementation to be successful. The first issue, or the weakness rather, the absence of documentation and information on how ICT is used, is more likely to be an issue particularly on those schools or places that are located at isolated areas or rural areas, schools that are far from the city, where internet connectivity or internet connections are very limited. Thus, their knowledge on ICT were also limited. In addition to that, educational researchers in the country tend to collect data on inputs such as the teacher, students, classrooms, and even expenditures, and tend to ignore the substantive issues regarding IT implementation and its effect on work processes and people. Without adequate documentation, decision makers tend to base educational policy on imprecise data or purely political considerations, rather than vigorous or empirical analysis and evaluation rather of educational resources. And the second weakness is the lack of coordination between public and private sector efforts. Both sectors did not meet at the middle, where they did not exert some efforts to make the implementation successful. And next one is the not sufficient teacher preparation. This weakness implies the lack of training programs for teachers related to ICT, particularly in how to use ICT in teaching and learning in the classroom setting. More specifically, there is uncertainty about whether computers in schools are fully utilized for educational computing. There are also concerns that computers meant for students were instead being used only by teachers for lesson plans preparation, and playing games. There were uncertainties if the given computers in schools were used for educational purposes or computing, and also it is a concern if the computers were fully utilized by the students and not by the teachers used only. And in some schools, computers are most likely not used because of some reasons. First one is the internet connectivity. It is hard to use a computer without an internet. You can't research for your activities, projects, assignments, and also the lack of maintenance for the computers. If the computer units are broken, there's no one to fix it, and that's a very, very crucial issue when it comes in maintaining the computer units in the schools. Some educational researchers found that lack of documentation regarding ICT use is a problem not just here in the Philippines but also to the other nations. In developing countries such as here in the Philippines, data that could help determine how scarce educational resources should be distributed or how effectively they are being used are simply not available. Also, the teacher preparation is not sufficient. Some training programs for teachers emphasize the use of specific software packages, but the integration of ICT in the curriculum is overlooked. Thus, as a result, as the teacher dares to use the ICT without adequate training, they are likely to do it inaccurately. Therefore, the Philippine national policy has been formulated in the advanced use of ICT in the education. The Senate Committee on Education, in cooperation with the DEX, launched the Project CARES in March 2001. DEX represents the Department of Education, Cultural, and Sports. The Project CARES was designed to upgrade the use and application of ICT in public elementary and secondary schools nationwide. The primary concern of the project is the school administration to respond to the need for accurate and timely data that administrators and teachers need to manage their classes. So the Philippines, as a developing country, is committed in instilling schools with ICT, hopeful that these technologies will improve the teaching and learning in today's knowledge society. Subsequently, the government and the private sectors have been introduced programs to deliver schools with computer hardware and software, internet connectivity, and teacher training programs, empowering the implementation of the ICT program in the country. However, as the substantial gaps will still exist upon the implementation of ICT program. Furthermore, to empower the implementation in ICT in the country, it should be demanded that there should be a further training program for teachers, for teachers in both computer literacy as well as for the ICT integration in the curriculum. By these gaps must be sufficiently addressed before ICT can have a significant impact on teaching and learning in Philippine schools. And that would be all, and thank you.